Okay, we will be talking about bugs. That's what you learned this past week. In the bug booklet that you got, the Tshuva from the Tzemach Tzedek that Rabbi Hamne gave a shiur on last week, I will be touching upon it very briefly. I will more focus, like we did the previous shiurim, of going through different scenarios, just pointing out interesting things that are relevant l'maisa from this topic. The Shulchan Aruch writes in Seif Hey regarding bugs in flour that they're usher because maybe they pirshu, maybe they moved. We know the rule when it comes to bugs. If they didn't come out of their natural surroundings and they still are where they are, then they are not usher. Only if they moved, pirshu. Now, the Tzemach Tzedek goes into a discussion in Sifkoten Chof in the Piskei Dinim about these bugs that are relevant to flour. The bugs that are relevant to flour, you're going to see this coming up. It's the milvin, something like that, which would be translated to flour mites or something along those lines. Which mites is a very general term. There's mites that are scale mites that you'll see soon are relevant to oranges. There is flour mites. Flour mites are also cheese mites. Now, if you look in the same Piskei Dinim with Tzemach Tzedek, it does discuss about gvina, but I'm not going to get into it now. Tzemach Tzedek explains that being that these bugs generate his havusam are at the moment after it's flour. It's not when it's wheat. And the flour is all considered as one pri. The whole bag of flour is considered as one pri, rather than saying there is a shitta that every speck of flour is something else. So when the bug moves from one to another, it's also. But the Tzemach Tzedek doesn't hold to that. So even though you see these little mites going from around in the flour, it's not a problem. What the definition of not a problem we'll soon see. He brings the Tshuva of the Neder B'Yehuda. Tshuva of the Neder B'Yehuda says, Ein limchois b'mi shemekel b'kemach hamunach b'kli. Can't be moicha against somebody who's mekel when it comes to flour that's already sitting in a vessel, because it's a safek shemo pirshu. It's a safek. We don't know exactly what it is. He connects it to what it says, what we learned in Sifdal and Shulchan Aruch. Regarding bugs that not shaloi pirshu, that didn't move from the fruit, and that's the Neder B'Yehuda Paskins. Ein limchis. It's against Shulchan Aruch, right? Yeah, it doesn't go against Shulchan Aruch. He can explain soon why it's different. He also brings the son of Neder B'Yehuda also connects Sifdal and Sifhei and Sifdal to receive shaloi pirshu, and he explains that these milvin that we're talking about, these mites that we're talking about, are the little ones that are not moving around too much. The only time you'll see them moving around is when you put them in heat. That is why everybody knows that if you have flour and you're in a hot climate, people who grew up in hot climates know that you keep your flour in the freezer, and that way you don't have any bugs in it. You leave it in a hot, humid place, you'll see, even if it's closed in a Ziploc bag, without any way for anything to get in, you will see bugs in there growing. So these little ones, you only see them when you put them in the sun. So it's mutter. Why? Because we don't consider it pirshu. Only the big ones are aser. The big ones are the ones that are problematic. And Tzemach Tzedek even goes further and says, even according to the Taz, who seems to be machmer, he would also be mekel in the small bugs that are in the small mites, which he categorizes as loy pirshu. And Tzemach Tzedek uses the lashon, v'yei lachin yesh laheres bazeh ketshuvas Neder B'Yehuda hanal. The mice you have to paskin like the Noida B'Yehuda. And he's mitzaref the svara of the Kreis Yuple. You see that it's milvin is not a berium, b'meil it's bottle when you mix it and you bake it. Okay, that's what he mentioned over here. We will see this topic of the milvin and bittul coming up regarding flour coming up soon again. But this is the first point we see here. Who do we paskin like? Tzemach tzedek we paskin like a Noida B'Yehuda. That when it comes to the smaller, this tiny one, the tiny mites, then we don't consider them as pirshu, and they are not essentially usher. Now, happens to be, if you see, if any of you ever went to a place where they make flour, or if you ever went, or you go to bakeries which have big silos, if they don't replace the flour often enough, if there's flour flying in the air, you will walk out of there itchy. And the reason is not because of the flour. The reason is because of these little bugs, which are smaller than the flour. You're going to sift the flour, you're not going to get them out. Little eggs are the bugs, and little bugs which are smaller than the flour. And if there is movement of the flour and they go up in the air, then they're going to land on you. And it's going to be itchy. So that's the bugs. They're smaller. You're sifting it is not going to help you for the small ones. It'll help you for the bigger ones. So the first point is we're not worried about these little bugs. That's the first point I want to talk about today. Let's move on to Siv Vav. In Siv Vav, the Mechaber talks about bugs which grow with the fruit. Bugs growing inside the fruit is still connected to the ground. It's considered usher, even though it never left the fruit and went on the ground. Inside the fruit, since it richesh, it moved around inside the fruit, it's usher. But if you're talking about bugs inside beans, little bugs, or other forms, legumes, there's no real place for the bug to move around, that's mutter. Because we're not talking about pirshu, they don't have a place to move, so therefore, even though it grew with it on the ground, they're not usher. There are a lot of shittas which are more machmer than the Mechaber. Tzemach tzedek and Zivkot Mechaf Aleph and Peskadinim goes through all the shittas at length. His maskane is the ikr is like the psak of the Bis Yosef. He mentions that the Taz says that in this scenario, if you cook them and then as a result of the cooking the bugs left the bean, the Taz makes the whole cooked thing usher. Tzemach tzedek says no. You could rely on the Mechaber, and you could be matir if it was cooked. We're going to get to cooked later also.
Even if it's a grown bug. Even if it's a grown bug, it's cooked.
Not a grown bug. If the bug is inside the bean, it didn't come out of the beans, but only through cooking it might have come out, it's mutter. Next topic, Sif Ches. The Mechaber writes that we have a chiyuv, bdike, in bugs, in fruits of that sort, where the bugs grow inside them. However, if you wait 12 months, then you could eat without checking. Why? Because the bug doesn't have vertebrae, and therefore can't survive 12 months, and it's after 12 months, it's as if it doesn't exist anymore, and you don't have to even check it. However, the Mechaber still says if you see any visible bugs outside, you have to remove them. The Tzemach Tzedek brings around Sifkot and Chof Vav. He brings what the Taz says. The Taz says that it's mashma from the Mechaber that if it's something that doesn't usually have bugs growing inside of it, you don't need bdika, you don't have to check. And therefore, it would seem, according to the Taz, there's no chiyuv bdika for fruits which are dry, or raisins, or flour. Then the Tzemach Tzedek goes into discussing about the idea of cooking. when you put something into water, even these bugs which never left are going to come out. And then you might not have all these ateilim of leirichesh and pirshu. It's not going to help you anything, because the bugs right now, you put them into the water, the bugs went out of the bean, and therefore it's also. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, even according to them, if you were to eat these things fresh, you don't have a problem, because you didn't put them into the water, you didn't cook them. Even according to those shittas which are machmer, you put them, being that you ate it raw, you don't have a problem. They're not separating. And so Tzedek explains, you have to cause something to come out, to cause this something to become aser. You have to do something to this bean or to this fruit, which is me'oirer, wakes up this bug to come out. So you put them in the water, it's davar me'oirer. That's how Tzedek refers to it. So he says, if there's no davar me'oirer like water, anything similar to it, ein lachush klal.
So like if you bake it.
That's the baking comes in a second. And therefore, Tzemach Tzedek says, if you want to cook it, don't put it into cold water, put it directly into hot water. They're going to die before they walk out of the bean, then you're fine. And in flour, what are you going to do? You don't cook flour, you don't put it into water. So first Tzemach Tzedek says, maybe. So he says, no, maybe by making it into a dough, being that you make it right away into a dough, it never has a chance to pirish, to move out. So Tzedek brings the svaras to here into Kan or Lakan, and concludes with a statement that could be looked upon as a general statement for all the din of Tefillin. L'maisi yesh loymer, da'kol lefi inin hachashoshes, im regilis hein eloi. Everything boils down really to what kind of chashash we're talking about. Is it a common chashash? Is it not a common chashash? Sometimes you're going to have a scenario where you have 3 sfeikas lahatit. So they bring the suffix 1, maybe there's no bugs. Suffix 2, even if there is bugs, maybe there were no pirish, they didn't separate. Suffix number 3, even if they're pirish, you cook them, they dissolved. Now this dissolving thing also keep in mind, because that's going to be relevant to what we're going to be discussing soon. In Sif Tes, which is a hemshech to Sif Ches, the Mechaber goes into another point. What happens if you cooked it during 12 months, without doing the bdika that you're supposed to? Didn't wait 12 months, you cooked it before that. So if you could check, you check. If not, it's mutter. However, if you find a few bugs, you throw them out. And he says, some people say it's only 1, 2, but if you find 3 or 4 bugs, you can't, everything is asur. That Amar right away adds, it only applies if it's muhzak b'tolaim, but if it's not muhzak b'tolaim, even 3 or 4, you could take care of it. And even if you have 3 and 4, and it's muhzak, that Amar says, if you're able to sift it and separate it, it's fine. The Shach explains, why is it so? Why do we say, after you cooked it, only if you could check, you check, and if you can't check, it's fine? It says because you have 2 sveikas. Suffix number 1, which you mentioned before, maybe there's bugs, maybe there's no bugs. Suffix number 2, even if there is bugs, you cooked it. Maybe they're in the meichel, maybe they're dissolved. Comes the Kreisiu place and tells you, good, so according to the Shach, you have a problem. What's the problem? If it's something where bugs are matzui, they're common, so you lost the first suffix. You can't say anymore, maybe there was bugs. It's matzui. It's common to have bugs in these kinds of fruits. You only left with 1 suffix of the mayach. Moving to really territory of a suffix, maybe suffix deraisa and l'chumra. Tzemach Tzedek brings this, and Sifkat Nechav Zayin tells you it's not so. You don't follow the crazy placey. When are we talking about that you lose the first suffix? Only when you found bugs in this fruit that we're talking about, in this thing that you're looking at. But if it's just a category of matzui, that it's common to find bugs, you still have the first suffix. Maybe there's bugs, maybe there wasn't bugs. And therefore, you still go back to the 2 sfeikas, that if you cooked it, you're fine. If you cooked it, you did something wrong and you cooked it, it's still fine. The only time that you have a problem is if you checked it and you found bugs, then you lose the first suffix. But otherwise, then you only have one suffix of nimayach. But otherwise, you don't have that suffix. And the maskana tzemach tzedek concludes, nira, that you don't have to be machmir like the crazy or placey. Tzemach tzedek, all tzemach tzedek. There's no alter Rebbe on this. It's all tzemach tzedek in Piskadinim, which is in the booklet that you got. Now, right after this, tzemach tzedek, in the Piskadinim, there's a short tshuva published about the cabbage, and there's also a long tshuva, which is in the Shas Tshuvas, which is also about the cabbage, the story of the cabbage. The story of the cabbage you heard about in the previous year. I'm not going to repeat the whole story. Over there it was, a person checked the cabbage, washed the cabbage, checked the cabbage, and didn't see any bugs. Cut it up into small pieces, and chopped it up. And then they cooked it. Afterwards, they discovered that there are bugs in cabbage, like in most other leafy vegetables, that the bugs that are there look the same as the cabbage. They're not different than the cabbage. You're not going to be able to tell them without proper looking for checking. I'm not going to get into the whole discussion if that's what's the definition of do you have to check when it's in such. There are some shittas if it's impossible to check, and Tzemach Tzedek does seem to follow those opinions. Yeah, I'm not going to go into detail into that. Over there, it says the shadow was to do with the cabbage. So Tzemach Tzedek over there says that Bichlal, the Tola'im became batul. They're not a barrier. And even if you could still recognize somewhat of some of these Tola'im, it's still fine. Kol she'iyaf shalavararoi, if you cannot separate it, or even you have Toilach Gadol, it takes you a long time to separate the bugs from it, it's already mutter. That's in the big tshuva in Siman Ayin, and in the little one, which is also published in the end of the Piskadinim, that Tzemach Tzedek over there points out that being that you have this, the suffix is that maybe they got crushed, maybe they got dissolved, you could be meiko. And also you have shalavarei, this for that it's hard, you can't separate it. Beria's bottle in 960, and over here it's definitely even if you were to say it's a berry, it's already bottle. Yeah, so that is the yesod of the Tzemach Tzedek. It's a very important yesod also to remember. When you're in a scenario that something was already processed, and it's impossible to separate, or it's hard to find them, then you have this heter. It's not a heter, it's a psak of the Tzemach Tzedek, which follows along, fits into all the Piskadim we were just discussing, that if it's, you always have the suffix of nimayach, you always have the suffix, maybe there wasn't bugs over there. You ought to be able to remove the sfex feike, you have to see bugs here. So now, if it's cooked, and you see bugs now, nicker, so you lost one suffix. But now you for sure nimaychu, and bottle, and then you have all the other svaras to be matter. That is, up until now, is what you see from the Tzemach Tzedek in Piskadinim. Just a few interesting points. I didn't go into long explanations, but definitely worth it to at least read through it quickly. All the Piskadinim, it's not that long, and it's not that complicated, and you'll find a lot of interesting things in there aside from what I just mentioned to you four interesting points in the Tzemach Tzedek. Now I'm going to move on to something which Tzemach Tzedek didn't write about. I'm going to move into a bunch of common products. Well, some of them are not so common anymore today in the kashrus world, but they used to be common. The Mechaber writes at the end of the Siman a very short seif. A burnt bug, you're allowed to eat it mishum refuah, only for medicine. The afra balmo, stam like sand. It's not anymore a problem. The Chochmas Sodom, which I put to you in your booklet, the same as the Chaya Adam, brings an interesting psak from the old Rav in Vilna, the Meir Tzedek in Vilna, that when you have orange peels, you should check them for bugs. Why? Because you have these milvins, these mites. What you have today, we call them scales. and you have to check for them. Now, all of you remember, there was about 7 or 8 years ago, all the Chassidish Chshedim came out that you're not allowed to drink Tropicana because of these scales. What was the thing over there? The scales are not inside the orange; they are outside on the peel. The peel has an oil. The oil has a very strong orangey taste. You squeeze the oil out of it. They add the oil to the juice. It gives a stronger taste. It's still freshly squeezed, just maybe not from the orange, from the peel. Still 100% from the orange, so it's fine. Not lying on the bottle. But you have bugs. They were saying if you want to drink Tropicana, you have to filter it. All right, so that is just a side point. So now, the Chachmas Adam over there points out that the old Rav of Vilna said that if you put these peels, these orange peels, into an oven, then the bugs burnt, and you're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to eat these orange peels. And right under it you have a Binas Adam which discusses it. And over there he explains what's the svara. Obviously came from waiting 12 months. The din of waiting 12 months, the din of burnt bugs. And it's totally dried up. Even if you're going to say it didn't get burnt and become like ashes, ultimately you put it into the oven, it completely dehydrated the bugs, so it's as if it has no lachluchas left, so it's done. You have a question, this din, if you want to compare it to 12 months, you're fine. If you want to compare it to burnt, Shulchan Aruch only says only l'refuah. Says that's not a problem. Shulchan Aruch is talking about when you want to actually eat the bug. That's when it says it's only l'refuah. If the doctor tells you that for your medicine you have to eat these bugs, so then if they're dry, if you burnt them, you're fine. You can eat them for medicine. But over here you don't want to eat the bugs. You want to eat the orange peel. If you want to eat the orange peel, you're fine. And another point, there's no bittul isu l'chatchila because you're not being mevatel anything. You're just burning it. Burning is not bittul. And he compares it to the din of the keva, the rennet that's used for making cheese, which was also discussed here in the previous year, not by me, by the Rappaport about the making cheese. And you all learned it also in your day. You dry it, becomes like wood, totally dry. It's lost the taste already, so it's fine. Yeah, that is regarding one way of processing. You solve a problem. One of the ways of solving the problem is by burning. You're not eating the actual bug. If it gets baked, dehydrated, you lose the bugs that are there. But what happens if you want to use something which comes from bugs? So I want to discuss two common products. One is not so common in America, one is common in America. First one is very common in Europe. There is a very deep red color called carmine. It's coccinelle is the French name for it, which is the name that's being used in the chuvas. What's carmine? It's a certain bug, certain beetle that you collect them, harvest them, you let them dry in the sun, you crush them, you mix them with some kind of acid or alcohol which dissolves everything, filter it, dehydrate it, dry it, has very, very low moisture afterwards, then that is mixed with other things, and it's mixed, when they buy it, you're not getting the powder. When they buy carmine, the companies, they don't get the actual powder of carmine, because it's too deep of a red. It's already diluted in 10, not batel b'shishim, it's diluted in 10. With sugar, with other stuff, and then that could be used in bakeries and other cookies, whatever they want to use. In America, you don't have the problem because artificial coloring the FDA still approves it. So anything here has artificial coloring. In Europe, a lot of places prohibit artificial coloring due to whatever health reasons they decided, and therefore, a lot of people are turning to this kind of coloring. So you have a much bigger problem regarding this coloring. Question is, what do you do? So this issue is not a new issue. This color, these bugs have been around for many years. And this idea of coloring with this bug has been around for many years also. This is being discussed in some of the tshuvas that I brought you. I brought you some tshuvas from the past, which are the base of the tshuvas of today regarding it. They're, for example, like this. You have the first one is the Shari Tzedek, Siman Tzadik Tes. He points out, L'chatchila, tzarich iyun l'hav, if you're allowed to be matter such a thing. You shouldn't do it l'chatchila. What was already done what was already done, you can't be oiser, but you have an issue in vatal isur l'chatchila. That's a Shari Tzedek. The Sholom Meishiv also is matter only b'di'evet, but not l'chatchila. And only if 12 months have passed. Now you see the 12-month idea pops in over here suddenly. And he also points out that it's a shaila if you could be mevatel such a thing, bichlal. Because you can be mevatel it in 1,000, you'll still be able to tell that that's what it is. It's there for color. So we have a machlekes, chazusa, if it's something, it's not something. The majority of poskim hold that chazusa is not a problem, if it's only chazusa. But you could still tell that it's there. It's not bottle, it's not, it's nicker. You could see that it's still red. Didn't change colors. You could dilute it, it's still red, so it's a problem. So back to the Shari Tzedek. In the first tshuva, he says what was done, you can't be oiser, but for the future, the issue of vatlis. Suddenly, the next tshuva in the Shari Tzedek, Siman Kuf, flips. He finds out more information. It says, being that the way it's processed is completely dried, yavish kates, and it has no more moisture in it, and it's not roi lachilas kelev, even lachilas kelev, at that juncture, the whole isur disappeared. When it's yavish, the whole isur disappeared. And after Yud Beis Chayesh, when it's dry, it's even better than a burnt bug. It's bichlal gone. He says, so that's for sure mutter. And even if you have a suffix, maybe 12 months have passed or not, still it could be matir, even lechatchila. Why? Because it's not roi lachilas, not roi lachila. But if it's not dry, then it's asur. Asur lechatchila. But yeah, but it's mutter, it's asur lechatchila. Why is it mutter b'diavad? Because it still doesn't have doesn't have a taste, doesn't have a proper taste. But if it's totally dry, it's not a problem. Even if it's a suffix, if it's 12 months or not. We're also putting restrictions on it. The Tiferes Tzvi is the one that's the most lenient. That's the one whoever relies on it, relies on it. He says, what's the reason why when you dry a keva, when you dry the stomach, the intestines of an animal to make rennet, it's mutter? Because once it's totally dry, it has no more taste of meat. So therefore it's fine. Same thing applies over here, being that it's dry. Even if you mevatel it in less than 60, it's still fine. And even if it's not nice and tam of gam, it's just neutral. It doesn't give tam l'shvachnas tam of gam. It's still not aser. It's completely mutter. Those are what we call the olden day poskim. What happens today? Today you have. I also brought you two modern day poskim. One is the Minchas Yitzchak, and one is the Shevet HaLevi. The Minchas Yitzchak is in Ois Beis. He talks about this shaila. Now, the Minchas Yitzchak opens up by saying that here we don't allow it. But he explains why it's. He says here, basically in the Minchas Yitzchak's companies, when he was in Manchester, we don't allow it. And he says even though, and the one who asked the question says, I really didn't want to be matred l'chatchila, but it was already done. The company, even though it's completely dissolved, it's like after ba'alma, after 12 months, everything. Not only that, it's also bottle, because what the companies receive is not the actual powder, it's only a mixed powder of it all. And so that means it was already in this bottle, by a goy. The goy took the original powder and was mevatel it in other things. And how was he do it? Through a davar apoigim, because he put it into acid to dissolve it. It's not a problem. And the Minchas Yitzchak seems to be more mekel. He brings a tiferes tzvi, which we mentioned before, that when it's dry, it's as if it's Yud Beis Chodesh, and it's mutter. And the maskana of the Minchas Yitzchak is to be matter. Definitely when you have a hefsed. Elamai, Minchas Yitzchak says, I don't understand why you can't just buy it and or whatever. Make sure you buy after 12 months. If you're not so comfortable with the Yavish being like 12 months, buy it after 12 months. You could find it after 12 months. That's the Minchas Yitzchak. But Be'etzim is matter it. Even though, but the opening statement is, in my companies I don't allow it. That's how he starts. The Shevet HaLevi also discusses this topic, also in your booklet. And he says, being that it's dry, first of all, why it's mutter. Second of all, you mix with it very sharp acid, very strong acids which dissolve the taste, and it becomes nifsal machilas kelev. And after this, as ponim chadashos ba'olakam, we got a new creation. So it's mutter. And you don't need 60, it's enough batel b'roiv. Why batel b'roiv? Because it's a davar mos for less than time. So that's a batel b'roiv is enough. And he concludes, even though according to halacha I see no reason to not use it. However, still pagam of timtum. Timtum, it doesn't say timtum alev, timtum amayach, timtum, but that's, he says still you have that issue, so it's kosher, don't use it. So that is when it comes to these bugs, color made from bugs. Today, almost I don't know of any kashrus agency which allows carmine in their productions in America. I don't know about Europe. I didn't ask. In America, no kashrus agency allows carmine into their products, even though there is a strong svara to be matter. It's yavish, totally dry, became a new metzias, etc. But ultimately, you're talking about crushed dead bugs. So you want to say it's for coloring, it's not really a metzias, etc. There's a lot of atadim to be able to rely on it. That is one product that I wanted to discuss. I'm going to move on to another product. This other product doesn't fall into the category of, it's connected to bugs, but it's not really about the bugs. It's something which comes as a result of a bug. What is that? It's called shellac. Anybody who you make wood is shellacked, it looks nice. The same shellac has a different name when it's put on candies. The same shellac that you put on wood, you put on candies. It's called confectioner's glaze. Look in a box of Myconikes, you'll see confectioner's glaze. That's the same shellac that's on your bookshelf, it's on your candy, it makes it shiny. How does it work? There's a bug called lac, which eats on trees that have a certain sap. The bug comes out, it gets processed in this bug's intestines, it changes its metzias somewhat. It gets a little bit processed with enzymes a little bit, and it comes out from the bug, from the other side of the bug, and it gets stuck onto the tree where the bug is, it dries up right away, and then at some point down the line, come the companies, they scrape off this from the tree, it's like hard pieces, they dilute it in, again, a very strong acid, and then they process it, they refine it, they make it into little pellets, and that's how it's sold to companies. There is a hechsher called udavari, which you see on products. Udavarer. Kraus, yeah. His father was a big Rav. Today he's a big Rav. His father, back in the day, was a big Rav. His name was Sholom Kraus. He wrote a tshuva to his son, who was already then running kashrus. This is Shas Tshuva's Divrei Sholom, Chelik Zayin, Siman Nun Aleph. It's not in your booklet. He was giving kashrus to candies which were using this confectionery glaze, and some people came screaming to him, yeah, giving us stuff from bugs and this and that. So he wrote a few svaras why it's mutter. He says, first of all, it goes through a process which changes its metzias. Even when I say it came from bugs, it goes through a process which changes its metzias. It loses a taste. So then it's batel b'roiv. And this scenario is definitely batel b'roiv. Even when it comes to carmine, which is for sure from bugs, he brings from the Tiferes Tzvi and the other ones which are matir. Elamai says, being that some people are only matir carmine only after 12 months, that or until it's 12 months that it becomes completely dry and no moisture. So use the shellac after 12 months. And you bichlal that it's dehydrated, it's dried up, it's burnt. So therefore he says he doesn't see any issue with it. He doesn't compare it to honey, but doesn't see any issue with it. Elamai says, ultimately you're my son, if I can't pass him for you, get somebody else to be mitzaref, to be matir it. So he turned to the Minchas Yitzchak. Minchas Yitzchak in Chelik Yud Siman Samach Hey has a tshuva that was written to this younger Kraus who's now running the kashrus. Then it was also running the kashrus. His maskana over there, there's a short tshuva, his maskana over there is, being that it's dried up, dehydrated, and he points out, it doesn't really come from the bug. It's the bug collects it and secretes it and takes it out. So it's similar to honey. So therefore, it shouldn't be a problem. And if you're worried about it, to be mevatel this, you can be mevatel even lechatchila. Elamai says, I can't tell you for sure it's mutter because you tell me there are people who are ma'arer, and you tell me when they'll contact me, tell me what their irurim are. I'll see it. Then maybe I'll give you a final answer. I don't think the ma'arerim ever contacted him because there is no other tshuva on this matter. The Minchas Yitzchak on this matter, but these are the two tshuvas regarding shellac. Now, when it comes to this shellac, when it comes to carmine, comes to a lot of other products which start from a trefa source. As we're moving on from the bugs, even though I try to stick to the bugs, so these two products are connected to bugs. There's another product I'm not going to discuss too much. Just mention it. One of the products where the heter of panim chadashes and totally dried and everything is used is gelatin. Gelatin is made from hides of animals. It used to be. Today it's a little bit different of a process. Today but a lot of rabbanim were matir gelatin back in the day. It's treated in acid. The hides and the bones are completely dried. It's yavash kaetz. There's nothing there. It's therefore it's panim chadashes and it's fine. What's this heter of panim chadashes? Panim chadashes is based on a Rosh. There's a Rosh that discusses musk. Everyone knows what musk is. Was used in as a moir. It was used in the Beis Hamikdash, and it comes from the certain musk deer, where they have under the skin, under their neck, they have this little sac where this is collected. And they take it out of there, they completely dry it up. See, it's similar to, it looks like blood. They completely dry it up, and that's what they make this from. And the Rosh is one of the people that the main one is being used there. It's mutter to consume it, because panim chadash is completely dry, it's panim chadashes. Yeah, and this is the asad for all these panim chadashes heterim. Aside for what we mentioned, that it's completely dry, it has no taste, over here you don't have that discussion. It's processed, but it still retains its original form. And the issue is panim chadashes. It went through a process, became panim chadashes. And there are a lot of people that paskin like that. However, if you look in Seder Birkas Hanenin to the Alter Rebbe and Perek Yud Aleph, where the Alter Rebbe discusses Hilchos Besamim, the Alter Rebbe talks about this musk. And he says that miskabetz sham tchila kemin dam, something looks like blood collects over there, and afterwards they dry it up, and from that they make the moir. And in that you make a b'remin v'samim. The Alter Rebbe writes, right? Then the Alter Rebbe adds something else. V'asur la'achloi v'litnei b'tafshel. It's asur to put it into your food. Mishum chashash dam, because of a chashash dam. That is the Shitta of the Rabbeinu Meir Halevi, which is brought in the Rabbeinu Yonah. The Rabbeinu Yonah disagrees with him. V'yesh matirim, some people are matir. Bal nefesh yachmir la'atzmei b'sofek shel Torah. The Bal nefesh would be machmir in such a scenario not to eat it. So you're going to go look at all these ateirim. If the heter is based on panim chadoshes, that something nisyabesh dried up and became blood that dried up, you have a Bal nefesh yachmir la'atzmei b'sofek shel Torah. Ultimately, it's still a sofek shel Torah. That's what Alter Rebbe says also litnei. But you have the other, if you rely on the other ateirim, something which is completely dried up, and it's 12 months, there's no moisture whatsoever, then you have established ateirim for it. But if it's just the fact that it dried up and it's mamish blood, it's not something which came from a bug, then the Alter Rebbe tells you, Bal nefesh yachmir la'atzmoi b'sofek shel Torah. Now, sorry, the Rosh is machmir, the Rabbeinu Yonah is matir when it comes to musk. I mixed them up. The Rosh is machmir, the Rabbeinu Yonah is matir. Huh? Yeah, that is when it comes to these products. So that's when it comes to the products that are relevant to production. It's also important to recognize these nekudas, like I mentioned before. When I'm mentioning to you, I'm just giving you pointers that aside to understand when is there taka and isser of bugs according to Tzemach Tzedek. What happens if something is processed? When you understand the b'di'evas, you understand the l'chatchilas also. You understand what's something which is aser, when you could be meiko, if it's a shasat chak, if it's a hefset merubah, whatever it is. Some things you could be matir l'chatchila, some things you could be matir only b'di'evad, but at least you know which way to go when it comes to these products. And with that, but the main conclusion, and that's why I wanted to end with the Alter Rebbe, that a lot of these things, yes, that seems like the Alter Rebbe says asur mishum b'yesh matirim. Then he goes Bal nefesh yachmir la'atzmei. It doesn't say, even though it's usually the Alter Rebbe, you say asur b'yesh matirim, and it would stop there. You would still think that it's follow that's asur. Then Alter Rebbe goes back and says Bal nefesh, which means Alter Rebbe doesn't follow the first shitta. If it's only Bal nefesh, it means that be'etzem the halacha is like the yesh matirim, not like the asur. But still, the lashon is not muter; the lashon is asur. It doesn't say muter and Bal nefesh yachmir la'atzmei. So it's asur. There's some asur. The halacha is yesh matirim, but Bal nefesh yachmir la'atzmei in something of this sort, and this could be applied to a lot of other things. That when you're dealing with such a scenario, if you're dealing with a l'chatchila, the Bal nefesh should be machmir la'atzmei, not just say that straight up rely on it. But that applies to things that are actual blood, actual bugs. If you want to look at the shellac, you have a very strong svara to say that it's not a problem because it doesn't come from a bug. The bug just processes it like honey. That's the main svara for it. Aside from the fact that the Minchas Yitzchak also mentions over there that it's I think Minchas Yitzchak mentions it, that it changes. It's only used it's mixed with other things. It's used, or the Divrei Sholom, I don't remember who mentions it. It's mixed with other things. It's only used for chazusa. It's not used for anything else. Zevaz agoyrem. You have a lot of ateirim for it, and probably even the chatchila. That's why you probably see today that samach shedim, which will never use carmine, but will use shellac, even the chatchila. Mashen kain and other products, they're not going to. When it comes to gelatin, they're not going to use, and carmine they're not going to use. But shellac they will use. I was asked the interesting shaila, going back to the carmine for a second. Everybody knows the idea of today you could take a cell from meat, and if you put it in the medium, put it in a liquid which has something which will help it grow, you could develop strands of meat. A certain company discovered that if you're going to take the cells of this bug that creates carmine, you put it into a similar medium, it will generate a lot more and make generate more cells of red without having to crush bugs. So you eliminate all the waste. You just have that being done. Shaila was, if this is considered better or worse. Mitzad echad, you're going to say it's better because it's so far removed from the original that it's not, that it's fine. Mitzad sheni, you could look at it, it's worse. It doesn't have the process of dried up, it doesn't have the process of bottle, it doesn't have, it's mamish yotzim in atame, it's just, it grows from the tame. So maybe it's also, maybe it's muta. I told that I don't have an answer for it, I'm still thinking about it, but I'll leave you with this question, and we'll be mamshich. So the next topic, Emir Hashem, next year.